The Legend of Tianding is a game that may not do anything I think overly original for the genre, but is just an overall fantastic example of action-adventure gameplay. We had a chance to play the whole game on stream, and this was all done with a press key provided by the publisher. But the gameplay itself is kind of like the, Taiwanese take off of Guacamelee. We play as, and I hope I don't butcher this too badly, Liao Tianding, essentially a Taiwanese Robin Hood, taking place during the early 19th century or early 20th century. The game's story is told through some really impressive handmade comic paneling, and some of the panels I think are just really fantastic. But it is up to us to protect the city of Taipei from bad guys, thieves, and apparently the colonial Japanese forces. And as a quick note, because the game takes place in the early 20th century, it does feature a racist slang against Japanese and Taiwanese people. So if that is a red flag for you watching this, just keep that in mind. But the game itself, story-wise, follows through multiple chapters. Each chapter has the same basic premise of you going around doing basic fetch quests for the various people, unlocking side quests, and then going into, the quote-unquote dungeon or actual action stage. It kind of reminds me of the Legend of the Mystical Ninja in that kind of pacing. The gameplay itself is very well done action adventure, and like I said a minute ago, it really does remind me a lot of Guacamelee. After the opening chapter, you'll unlock 4 bits of movement text / combat that allows you to go forward, up, or slam down, and these are used to extend your movement in the air. You'll get some other basic Metroidvania staples throughout the game, but I don't know if I would really consider this a Metroidvania, as each stage is entirely linear. And while you can return to areas to find additional treasures and rewards, this is not a case where you are required to get a power later on in order to get a treasure at an earlier level. It will just make it easier for you. Now, from the comic book style and just the general look of this game, you can tell that the developers really put a lot into this. And that is definitely on display with the multitude of collectibles. There are 145 of them in the game that you can find, steal, and acquire through quests, and they all have lore and backstory related to Taiwanese life back in the day. As you play through, you also can find or acquire upgrades for your weapons, more health, more stamina, etc., etc. And all this is done, again, through the structure of the different chapters. And I think this is a really standout from a combat point of view. Again, it has that great feeling of being able to knock enemies around and combo them that we saw with Guacamelee. But unlike that game, The Legend of Tianding doesn't really reward you for combos, at least not from what I've seen from our play. There are, of course, challenging boss fights, and there are 2 different endings. One incredibly depressing, which according to the store page, or according to the forums, was kind of accurate to life. But overall, I think this is a fantastic game, and there's not really anything that I would point out as wrong or bad about its design. But I do have a few nitpicks with the overall kind of structure of the game and where it kind of stumbles in a few aspects. And we're going to talk about that next, but first a quick break, and as always, if you're interested in my books on design, then check these out. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. With The Legend of Tianding, the basic combat and general core gameplay work really well, but it's the secondary systems that are attached to it that lead to some very questionable decisions. So the footage you're seeing is seen during one of the boss fights, and the boss fights in this game, especially on the highest difficulty, are certainly spikes. and they're really going to test how well you know the combat system as well as the upgrades. So, the first bit of weirdness in the game is that after the first chapter, you are given the ability to fast travel. But the fast travel itself only works for half the map. You see, you go to a temple to meet kind of like the main characters of the story frequently, and you have to constantly keep going back and forth between that side of the river and the main city. And it's weird that the game just never introduces a way to just quickly fast travel around. Now, one thing that I didn't mention in the last part is that you are able to steal weapons and items from characters. When a character's health falls low enough, or several times during boss fights, you can hit the Y button and you'll use your red sash to steal a random item. Now, the reason why this is important to mention is that there are hidden collectibles and side quests that will revolve around you taking miscellaneous items from the various enemies in each area. But the weird thing is that it is entirely RNG dependent. So you could repeat the same area 5, 6, 7 times, get through it all, and you still did not get the item that you needed for the side quests. Now, the good news is that the side quests aren't required for the game's true ending, but it's a very weird limitation for this kind of design. I like the ability that you can steal weapons from enemies and use it in the short run, and the rifle, for instance, is surprisingly OP in this game, especially when you get the shadow clone power that mimics your attacks. Again, the core gameplay of Legend of Tianding works really well, so it's weird to have these kind of minor issues. Another one is the Talisman System. The Talismans are essentially your passive build options that we see from a lot of action games. You unlock more talismans as you steal or find them in the world, and you can apply them to your talisman bag in order to get various passive benefits. But the limit of, at most, 5 really makes it that you can't play around with it too much. I would suggest if you are going to go for playing this game on the highest difficulty, get the talismans that give you more iframes on hit, as well as recover more health when you use your buns, which are like your Estus, as it will allow you to more effectively tank during the boss fights, especially when you get to some of the more heavier hitters. So with all that said, like I said in the first part, Legend of Tianding does not do anything, I think, above and beyond for the action-adventure genre. I think it is kind of a missed opportunity to not give you more options or open things up for more of the tech. Again, this is not really a Metroidvania, as each level does not really require you to revisit it with new abilities. And you'll unlock the bulk of them, again, within probably the first 40 minutes of play. But if this is like the first game from the studio or the first one in the style from them, it is very well done. If you've played other action-adventure or Metroidvania style games and you're looking for a new one, I would definitely check out The Legend of Tianding. If you haven't played those games yet, I would go for them first, as again, this one is just more on a very solid, but nothing we haven't seen before side of things. So, with that said, we're going to wrap up our review here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd like to thank the developers again for giving me a press key to check this one out. You'll find links to it in the description down below. You'd like me to take a look at your game in the future, please get in touch. Check out our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, worries, and the art and science of games. Once again, this has been the Legend of Tianding, and until next time, take care.